Yes, yes. Well, good afternoon. This is Comp 422 and Comp 620. Today, we are talking about digital money, digital currency. We're going to look at a little encryption stuff first, because some of that can be used in clever ways for digital money. We'll then talk about different ways to run digital money, including Bitcoin. We'll spend more than enough time talking about Bitcoin and security involved there. Okay. Remember, we have symmetric key encryption, where both keys are the same, and there's an asymmetric key encryption, where there's a public key and a secret key. RSA is the most commonly known public key or asymmetric key encryption system. And review of how it works. These are slides I stole from a few weeks ago. We have a couple letters. N is a big number. That is the product of two large primes. And M is the message. You usually think of it as a bunch of characters, but it's bits. Bits are bits. And you can think of the bits as a number. So we can take this large number and raise it to a large power. The large power we're going to use is E, which is the public key, and then D, which is used in the private key. So all you have to do is raise M to the E mod N, and you get a number. That is the ciphertext. That's what you save or send to somebody else. The receiver then, who wants to decrypt it with their private key or secret key, raises C to the D mod N, and they end up with the original message. So that's how we do it. All right, and because you can encrypt things with either the secret key or the public key, you could also sign them by taking the message and raising it to the D power, which is the secret part mod N, and you get the signature. Okay. And here's the example I showed before. You just take a couple very large primes, multiply them together, take the totient of it, find a number that is the greatest common divisor between E and totient of it, and which is P minus N to Q minus N, equals 1, meaning there is no divisor. The only divisor is 1. That's E. And then you pick D. And it's important to note that D is the inverse of E. So that's if you multiply D times E mod this totient, you end up with 1. The inverse, of course, is the number you get 1. This is mod, a very large number. So if you multiply a number by a very large number, it goes around many times and ends up back on 1. So we've got public key uses E and the secret key uses D. Here's a numerical example I showed last time, and it works. If you don't believe me, go through get your calculator out and try it yourself. Okay. Blind signatures are a way to sign something. We talked about digital signatures as being able to sign something to prove that it belongs to you. I can send a message to you, digitally sign it, and then you can be assured that it came from me because we hash the message and then digitally sign that or encrypt it with my private key, and then you can decrypt it with the public key. Blind signatures allow us to sign something or seal it so others can't see it. They can see that it's signed, and then they can sign it. Okay, so we can have some information, and I can sign it without having to reveal what it is. It really works well if you think about having an envelope with a piece of carbon paper. Now, I know most of you have never seen carbon paper in your life. It's a piece of paper that if you press on it, it makes an image. So if you put the carbon paper inside an envelope and somebody signs the outside, the signature is made on the inside, but you don't see what you're signing. Now, of course, typically most people do not want to sign a blank check, but there is a value in signing something so people know that you signed it, even though you may not see it. An example I've used before is perhaps somebody wants me to witness that they're signing their will. I can see it, they're signing the will, but the contents of their will is no business to me, so I could blind sign it without having to look at it. But I can see that they signed it, so I can verify that, yes, they signed it without having to look at the will. a blind signature might be used for that. We can do this with the RSA algorithm. So in this case, Alice wants to send Trish a blind sign message. Apparently, in all the literature for blind signatures, instead of Alice and Bob, it's Alice and Trish. Okay. And of course, the message is N. Trish's public key is N and E, just as before, and a D with a secret key. So typical signing, there would be the typical sign message. But we want to do this without Alice knowing the contents of M. Here's how it works. We got to generate a new random number. Sort of random, make a random number, but you have to make sure that this random number has the greatest common divisor, the largest number that will divide into both R and N being that great big mod number for the RSA algorithm, is 1, meaning there is no number that divides even into either of them. So you pick a random number, test it, keep picking until you finally find one which has no common divisor between your big random number and N. Then, in order to create the blind version, you multiply M, the message, times R to the E, R being that big random number, E being the public version of the key. So it's R to the E mod N multiplied by N. And now we've got B, the blind version. We can send B to Trish. Trish can unsign, signs are, okay, that's signs are by raising B, the blind version, to D and send it back to Alice. Okay, E being the private part of the key, D being the public part. So Trish knows D for Alice's key. Okay, now they can unsign this by raising it to the, that's R to the -1. That doesn't show up very well in the slides. That's the inverse of R to the -1. And so now if you multiply it by R up here, multiply R to the -1, and we end up with the regular sign message. Okay, it's important to remember that E and D, the pieces of the key, where N's the the big number and E and D are the numbers you raise it to, there are inverses. That was calculated several times before. They're inverses. So if you multiply R to the E times D, well, E times D are inverses, so you end up with just R mod N. And then if you divide it by R, you end up with 1 mod N. So it all factors out. Okay, I got out my calculator and ran an example. So we've got picked 2, well, rather small prime numbers and created N, which is N times Q. I picked small numbers so my calculator would handle it. Choose E and D. So E is just a random number I picked, and D is the inverse of that mod N. So there we go. So now I pick a random number, 5, 7, 6, 7. And there's no numbers that divide both 5, 7, 6, 7 and 11, 4, 1, 3. Okay. Excuse me? Yeah, well, you end up with big numbers because we're doing with big numbers, not too big. And then you take the inverse of this. Okay, we got all that. All right, now we've got ourselves an R, we've got an E and a D. We want to do this. So we got a message, picked a message. Blind version is B, R. So I did that, B, multiply these numbers, do that, raise this to that power, mod this, which, by the way, that takes a program to do it. My calculator doesn't handle that either, but you end up with a number. Okay. So that's the blinded version. So we get the blinded version, raise the B, and we end up with 4, 7, 32. We could unblind that by doing this, and you end up with the original number, 70. Okay. So blind works. Why do we want to carry it? Well, there's several reasons why you might want to do that. Voting systems. You might want to vote on something in public elections. You don't want the election officials to see how you voted. In the United States, you're supposed to be able to vote secretly, so nobody knows how you voted. But they need to know that you did vote. So you could have a ballot and you could digitally sign it. They know that you voted, but they don't know how you did it. Okay. So here's our first question. See if you're still awake. Okay, people here, let's get your clicker cards out and where's the blinds inch? Okay. Good. All right. Everybody got their clicker cards? Anybody forget it today? All right. Okay, the 75% of the online people have participated. So let's see how the class and people, in-person people do. Not voting today? All right. Well. Okay. Online. We've got about 87% of the people online. Wow. Very good. 87% of people said Bob can view the message in plain text, which is incorrect. Bob actually cannot view the message. Bob cannot view the message. If Alice blinds it, makes it so you can't see it. I don't require you to look at all that crazy math. I just did an example to make sure that it worked. What I want you to know, though, is that blinding it encrypts it in a way that somebody else can sign it, but they can't see it. Okay, that's the important thing. So, yes.
The question. So we've been talking about RSA.
Yes.
And the examples you've been giving have been the message being numbers, right?
Right.
In a situation where the message isn't the number, right? It's
text. Usually it's text or okay, but it's bits. Text is a bunch of bits in ASCII character set or Unicode or whatever your favorite character code is. It becomes a bunch of bits. A bunch of bits can be considered a number or a bunch of characters or instructions. They're bits. If we think of them as a number, which we can do as a very large binary number, then look at M as being that large binary number, and you can raise it. If it's a number, you can raise it to a power. So it's a big number raised to a big power, creates a huge number, mod n, which rounds it down to something between 0 and 1 less than n. So even though M is usually text or some non-numerical value, you can always think of a block of M. Since we break it in RSA in the blocks of 64 bits, you can think of it as a 64-bit number, which is a big number. But then you raise it to a big power, it becomes a huge number, and you mod n to trim it down. By the way, if you take M to the E mod n, well, M to the E could be huge, but you can go, which is really just M times M times M E times. You can go M times M mod n, trims it down to a smaller number, times M mod n, do that E times, and that will get you the value. You can take the mod every time and it gets you the same result. Yes, sir. Yes, I am recording, and I thank you. I think I'm recording now. Now he's asked, and I have to go check. Yes, I'm recording. But thank you for thinking about that. Yes. Okay, so the clue with signing it, blinding it, is you can blind it, meaning nobody can see it. You can unblind it. Okay, that's the real thing. And it's this tricky thing with RSA. You can look at it in detail if you like, but knowing the details is not as important as knowing that, yes, it works. You can sign something, you can't see it. We're going to use that little trick in a minute. Okay, we're going to talk about digital money. Let's think about real money. $100 bill. Let me check. Nope, no $100 bill in my wallet. Maybe you're different. I'm just a lowly faculty member. I don't carry $100 bills around. But there are things about the $100 bills or any money. Money's anonymous. You can pay somebody with dollars and nobody knows what you bought They don't even have to know who you are. If you walk up to the store, they don't know who you are. You give them some money, they give you the product, and you're done. Walk away. The government will take it. It's hard to copy. Government tries real hard to make the dollar bill, particularly the $100 bill. This is an old $100 bill, I believe. It doesn't have all the fancy things that they've added to them to make them more difficult to copy. I guess the American $100 bill and the $20 bill was the copyright material, or excuse me, counterfeit material. People really wanted to counterfeit those things. And so in the last several years, the Treasury Department has made it very difficult to copy these. People still do it, but it's make it more difficult. And if you lose your $100 bill, if it gets destroyed somehow, then it's lost. By the way, if you harm the dollar bill, if you lose 2/5 of it, if it gets ripped or burned, you can take the 3/5 to a bank and they will give you a new $100 bill. That's the rule for the Treasury. The Treasury will accept 3/5, 60% of a bill, give you a new one. So if it gets ripped, torn, burned, give it back to you. And if you ever tour the Treasury in DC, they'll show you examples of bills that have been bleached in somebody's laundry, bills that have been dyed in somebody's laundry and ruined in many ways. Okay, so we want to make digital money. We want digital money so that we can do online transactions, because it's really hard to use cash on an online transaction. We want to have some of the properties of real money and a few more. Well, obviously, we should not be able to create our own real money. We can't counterfeit it. Well, if you have some digital money, in whatever form that might be, you cannot spend it twice. A digital dollar can be spent once, one vendor, and that's it. If you try to defraud, somebody should be able to capture you. Simple failure should not lose the money. If your system hiccups, if your desktop crashes, you shouldn't lose your money. And of course, one of the things we'd like to maintain is privacy. Not all these things are maintained, but these are some of the goals we'd like to have. Okay, we have credit cards. The primary means of digital money right now is credit cards in the United States. Other countries use different forms. There are peer-to-peer financial transactions you can do with your phone that are very common in other countries. You can do in the United States. Sometimes you get your phone, tap the thing, and give money to somebody else. But right now, credit cards are the #1 means of paying somebody. In order to do a credit card, there is a central server, actually many servers, but the bank that issues your credit card has a server. When you go to the store and you put the card in the credit card machine or you swipe the credit card, then it sends a message to the server and says, I want to give this vendor, this company, the store, this much money. And so the bank looks in your account, makes sure that you have that much money, takes that much money out of your account, puts it into the store's account, and sends a message back to the machine that says, yes, everything worked fine, or no, for some reason, it didn't work fine. So the merchant then gets the money and your money is lost from your account. Now, when you do this, the bank knows that you have spent so much money at this store at this time. So they know a lot about the transaction. It's not very private. One of the goals of digital money is to try to make it more private. There are several ways to do this. I have a couple ideas that aren't actually my ideas, a couple ideas that well, actually this one's mine, but the others I found on the web. We'll talk about those. So first one, First Digital Bank of Greensboro has an RSA key. We're going to sign things. So Alice wants to buy something. So Alice generates a large random number, a nonce, and sends a digitally signed request to her bank for X dollars, for a specified number of dollars. The bank, and it's signed by Alice. So the bank gets a signed request from Alice that is digitally signed. bank checks to Alice's signature to make sure it's correct, checks to make sure she has the money, and saves this random number, the big notes that she sent. Then they take the money from Alice's account, write a certificate, or that's not a digital certificate, but a receipt saying that Alice now has X dollars, and sends this to Alice, and it's signed by the bank. So now Alice has a note from the bank saying this is good for X dollars, and it's signed by Alice's bank. So she goes to Bob's store. Alice gives Bob this signed note. Bob checks the digital signature to make sure it comes from the First Digital Bank of Greensboro. Checks out, okay, this is valid. It comes from the bank. Bob transmits that note to his bank. His bank verifies the signature and makes sure that it is a valid, checks the random number that Alice first generated, that the bank has saved, to make sure this note has not been used before, because you don't want money to be multiply spent. And once they've decided that it's digitally signed by Bob, by Alice, and by the bank, then it's okay. They give the money to Bob and send a receipt back to Bob saying, yes, it worked. And it's all good. We're done. She give them the goods, give them the receipt if you want. Okay. And this works. All the transactions are signed. So everybody knows that it did come from the entity that said they sent it. It can't be denied. It's non-repudiation. You cannot say, no, I did not buy this. We know that you did because you signed it. At least you have the private key that did this. In this case, in the explanation I gave, we didn't talk about encryption. We just talked about signatures, but you could encrypt things all over the place as you decided. The bank knows that Alice got the money and knows where the money went because it knows it came from Bob. Bob returned it. So the bank can keep track of who Bob's customers are, and they know where Alice is spending her money. So it's not much different than a credit card. Yes, sir.
Oh, isn't that what checks?
Oh, the question is this similar to a written check? Oh, very well, in a sense. With this system, Alice first has to request the money from the bank, whereas you have a check, it's just a piece of paper. You know, must have enough money because they have more checks left. So here, Alice is pre-authorizing the sale from the bank, where she asked the bank to give her a note that is good. It might be like a certified check. Like a certified check. You've gone to the bank, you say, give me a check to this person and verify that I have the money. And that's what a certified check does that. They take the money out of your account. You then take that certified check to the merchant and they'll accept it because, gee, the bank's already taken the money. They know it's good. So it's yeah, okay, thank you. It's good like a certified check. All right. Moving to another suggestion. This next one is not mine. It's by David Shum, whose name we'll see in a few minutes. David Shum invented the idea of blind signatures. So he's responsible for all that. And once he did all that, I thought we could use it for digital money. And so in this case, not only do everybody have a RSA type key, but the bank has digital keys for each denomination. They have a $5 key, the $10 key, the $100 key, and so forth. Okay. And when we go over this, the thing I want you to get is not all the details, because I have 8 slides describing how this works. I'm busy this afternoon. But it's important that you see that, yes, we can make a system where you can spend money back and forth and nobody knows who spent it, where, or how. We are anonymous in the seller, the purchaser. Okay. And it's secure. So this is digital money part 2, or idea 2, part 1. All right. Alice wants to buy a widget from Bob, and they decided on the price, well, X dollars in this case. So first thing, Bob is going to request a deposit slip because he, in the future, is going to deposit that X dollars into the bank. And so he asks the bank, and he sends a nonce, a random number, which the bank is going to keep. So here in the picture, you can see that Bob is sending a request for an X dollar deposit slip and the random number to Bob's bank. The picture isn't very clear. We have Bob's bank and Alice's bank. I drew them next to each other, but they're supposed to be separate. Bob's bank is separate from Alice's bank. Although it is useful to consider what if Bob and Alice use the same bank. We'll get to that shortly. Okay, so Bob expects to get X dollars. He tells his bank. The bank saves that random number and sends back a digitally signed deposit slip saying, here you go, Bob. You can deposit your money with this slip and it's signed by Bob's bank. Send that back to Bob. Then Bob sends that digitally signed deposit slip over to Alice. So here's that deposit slip and it's signed by Bob's bank. Well, now Alice has it. Alice blinds that deposit slip. In other words, using the procedure we saw before, she makes it so nobody but she can tell what the contents of that is, but it can be signed. So she takes that deposit slip, blinds it, which indicates by the green box, Alice, and sends this note to Alice's bank saying she wants to withdraw X dollars. Okay. Oops, sorry, we jumped ahead there. So the bank has got a request from Alice to withdraw X dollars. So they take X dollars from her account and they create a deposit note, or they take the blind slip that she sent them and signs a note saying, this is good for X dollars. So what we see here is the Bob's X dollar deposit slip signed by Bob's bank, blinded by Alice. And then an X dollar note signed by Alice's bank. So now the bank does not know where the money is going, but Alice does. And they're going to give it X dollars. Okay, now there's got Alice unblinds the note and ships the whole thing as it's signed by Alice's bank over to Bob. Bob then sends it on to his bank. Now his bank then checks the signature of Alice's bank for X dollars. He wants to make sure it came from a valid bank. He checks Bob's digital signature to make sure it did come from Bob. He has a random number that we had that was there. Checks it, is this the random number? Has this not been spent before? And if everything's true, if all the digital signatures are correct, the nonce is correct, then he puts X dollars into Bob's account and sends back a receipt to Bob, telling Bob that you have now deposited that money. The transaction has gone correctly. And this is usually where you see a little note on the teller's machine saying, yes, the card is good, you can have it. So all that, there are a lot of messages back and forth. We won't go over, but the whole thing is, the result is that it was secure and anonymous. Bob's bank knows that the funds were drawn from Alice's bank, but they don't know from whom. It just says this is good for X dollars. So Bob's bank doesn't know where the money's coming from. It doesn't know that Alice is spending it. Alice's bank knows she made a withdrawal, but doesn't know where the money's going. Now let's for a minute think that Alice and Bob bank at the same bank. Then they still don't know. They might say, oh, within a certain time frame, a specified amount of money was going out and coming back in, which might trigger them. Also, they're getting something signed by their own banks. When they unsign, they check the signature, they go, oh, this is me. They might know what's going on. So there is a little loss of privacy if the banks are the same. Otherwise, if they're separate banks, then things are relatively secure and private. Secure they are always. Private, you lose a little privacy if Alice and Bob are at the same bank. Okay, so that's secure and anonymous. That's one way to do it. It's kind of complicated. There are other ways that you do digital money. First, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of a blockchain. Anybody, well, I should have asked, have you heard about blockchains in other classes? We're all over the news. Nobody says they heard about blockchains. Oh, I should have asked that. Well, okay, you'll hear about it a little bit today. Okay, it is a decentralized, distributed public database proposed by David Shom, who, if you remember, did the blind signatures back in his PhD dissertation in 1982. And it's a chain, a linked list of data blocks, each one pointing to the previous one. So as you create a new one, you point it to the previous one, and it's then signed by a group consensus. The whole big thing here is that it's signed as a group. Everybody agrees, yes, this is correct, and then they store it away, and everybody can check it and know that it is correct. It solves the Byzantine generals problem. That's about all it does. People think blockchain is the answer to everything, it seems. Everybody goes, oh, we'll use blockchains to solve that. Oh, that's a waste of time. Blockchains do solve some problems, but they're not the answer to everything. If you can have a centralized database, that's a much easier way to blockchain, let me tell you. Much more efficient, much more secure. So, but if that's not the way it works, then you can do blockchains. Blockchains provide a certain amount of anonymity, which we'll talk about soon. The Byzantine generals problem. Let me just explain that, because I'm sure there's somebody out there who doesn't remember the Byzantine generals problem. It comes from, imagine you have two armies, two cooperating armies on either side of a valley. And inside the valley is a third enemy army. And the two armies want to attack the enemy and drive them out. Now, if any of the two armies attack by themselves, they'll be defeated. Let's just say there's 1,000 soldiers in each of the two armies and 1,500 soldiers in the evil side. So if they attack individually, they'll be wiped out. But if they both attack together, they've got it. They'll drive out the enemy. So General A sends a message to General B saying, attack at dawn. General B will send a response back saying, I got your message. But what if this courier that's running between them gets caught or killed during the way? If General A sends a message to B, of course, that message doesn't get there, he won't send a response. If B doesn't get a response, or A doesn't get a response from the other general, he doesn't know whether he's got the message, and he probably shouldn't attack if he doesn't think the other guy's going to attack at the same time. So what if, okay, the message gets to General B in the first place, and he sends response, but the response doesn't get back. Now, General B has agreed that he's going to attack at dawn with, he thought, the help of General A, but General A hasn't got the response because it was captured. So he's going to attack because, so of course, to fix this, General A could send a message back to General B saying, I got your response. But what if that gets lost? If you keep following this, you realize there is no solution to this. You get back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. There is no answer for sending messages back and forth. So you're ever totally sure that either side or both sides got the message. That's the Byzantine generals problem. Blockchains answer that problem with a consensus encryption of the blocks. This is what Bitcoin uses. Bitcoin is a popular cryptocurrency. I'm sure you've all heard about Bitcoin by now, and it doesn't require any sort of central bank or authority. It uses a group consensus with a blockchain to do this. Invented, interestingly enough, by somebody who nobody knows who that is. It's either a person or a group. Satoshi Nakamoto, I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly, but back in 2009, and it uses blockchains. I might note that David Shom invented blockchains back in the 1980s, and about 20 years later, Nakamoto used blockchains. The only thing he added was something known as mining, the proof of work that we'll get to shortly. So it's pretty common. Looked up the latest numbers I could find. There are currently 83 million different people using Bitcoin. That's quite a number of people. How many here? Okay, quick question just to find out if you've ever used blockchains or Bitcoins yourself. Remember that this is anonymous, so I don't know if you've used Bitcoins. So, okay, get your clicker up there. Well, okay, it's not a hard question. Oh, watch, don't cover it with your fingers. All right. Okay, about the same in class. 7 people in class responded. 4 said they have used Bitcoin. So that's 57%. Online, 59%. Almost the same people have used Bitcoin. Oh, we have 1 maybe. Online, there's a choice of maybe. So, okay, so about half of you have used Bitcoin or have owned a Bitcoin. I hope it was a successful use of Bitcoins. Okay. Bitcoins use blockchains and they require a proof of work. The proof of work is done by anybody and everybody. Anybody, when you put a new block onto the blockchain, you have to add a hash that verifies that it's correct. But the hash has to meet a certain requirement. You have to create a hash that's an SHA-256 hash, but the value has to be smaller than a given number, which means many of the beginning bits have to be 0. Okay, so if you remember earlier, we said you cannot invert the SHA-256 hash. And this is what you have to do for this. You have to find some input value that when you run it through SHA-256, it gives you an output value. It's not exactly, but at least you know the first so many bits are all zeros. So you have to try a lot of them. So you have to do a lot of SHA-256 hashes on various random numbers until you find one that works. And then if you are the first person to find such a hash, you can send it there and you're the winner. You have mined a Bitcoin. The Bitcoin blockchain looks something like this. You have blocks linked to each other. In each one, there's a hash of the previous block. So block 12 has a hash of the block 11 is block, and so forth, all the way down to the dawn timestamp says when they did it. And the nonce is the number that you have to get lower than. So they're all hashed. I believe these arrows are pointing in the wrong direction, but I stole this picture from Wikipedia. Okay, the data, because we want to store data about transactions of money. Multiple transactions are all grouped together. And we have what's called a Merkle hash tree here that groups all the data together. Picture here of a Merkle hash tree. The leaves are where the data is. And then the next node up from a leaf has a hash of that. And then in a binary Merkle tree, and they usually are binary, you combine them together, and that one has a hash of the 2 previous ones, and so forth. As you go up the tree, each one's a hash of the previous ones. The purpose of the Merkle hash tree is to prove that this leaf belongs here. That if we sign the whole thing in the block, then we know, oh, all these transactions and all your money transactions are down here at the lower level. Those show that you actually are in the blockchain, and so that you did spend the money. So it's publicly known that this anonymous user gave the money to that anonymous user. Bitcoins can be mined by anyone, but it is the first computer that finds the answer to the inverse SHA-256 that wins. So the faster you are, the more likely you are to win. So organizations have been working real hard to create things that compute this very quickly. I read an IEEE Spectrum article a couple of years ago about a Bitcoin mine, and it was huge. They had warehouse after warehouse of specialized processors. Somebody had made a special chip And they had boards with many special chips and racks and filling up these warehouses of thousands, tens of thousands of machines that calculate this. And so the purpose there was to quickly calculate the hash and be the first to sign this, so they got the reward. There is a reward. When you sign we'll talk about the rewards in a minute, but when you calculate the hash, you're the first one to do it, then you get a reward. They make a new Bitcoin, or you get Bitcoins as a reward for doing this. This is how new Bitcoins are created, by being the successful hash. Once upon a time, and not too many years ago, well, until what's a year and a half ago, China was a leading Bitcoin miner, doing about 65 to 75% of all the mining. Well, China decided to ban cryptocurrency mining. They banned cryptocurrency, period. And so you can't mine it anymore there. China can do that. They're China. Now, where are they? Well, the United States does about a third of the Bitcoin mining. Kazakhstan, a Central Asian country, mines a bunch, and Russia mines a bunch. Now, the reason they want to mine these is because when you successfully find a value that hashes that you've hashed this correctly, and you are the winner of the hash speed contest, then you get Bitcoins. Now, once upon a time, you got 50 Bitcoins for doing it. And then it drops every so many, 210,000 blocks. So every time they make a block, they keep counting. So on block 1, you got 50 Bitcoins. But on block 2,110, you only got 25, and it goes down. I think where are we at? So every time you do that, it goes down to half. So now it's only down to 2.25 Bitcoins per successful mining operation. Note that the price of Bitcoins changes. It fluctuates wildly. Talk about that in a minute. So that's interesting. The first Bitcoin transactions, people actually sometimes buy things with Bitcoins. Some famous people said they want to be paid in Bitcoins. But back in 2010, guy convinced somebody at Papa John's Pizza to deliver him $25 worth of pizzas, and they gave them $10,000 Bitcoins, which means each Bitcoin is worth $0.25 cent. That guy at Papa John should have saved his Bitcoins. I hope he because it took until February 2011, which is about a year later, that Bitcoins became more valuable, up to about $1. And in November 21, they hit a high price of $68,789. So the guy who had 10,000 of those would have, what is that, $680 million? Not bad for a pizza. Okay. So, question, see if everybody's paying attention. Another poll. Get the right poll.
So I have a
Question.
question. Oh, well, it's really good. So I did measurement study and the impact on blockchain technology back that May 2021. And I wanted your opinion on what is your opinion on the government interfering with blockchain, particularly cryptocurrency?
Oh, that's coming up. We're going to talk about the government's impact, and I'll tell you what I think in a well, but very good question. Well, yes, it's a question, but it doesn't have. Oh, sorry. Distracted me. Got timed out. My fingers are sloppy. If you don't press it, you don't have yours on. I'm not going to answer this one. Remember, all the answers are anonymous. Oh, okay. It's A and C. The answer is actually okay. In the poll here, oh, everybody online, we're all over the place. Here in class, people here in the live studio audience know that the answer is C. They're given to the miners when they mine something. Yes, that's where new Bitcoins come from. The miners do not continue to create them. Apparently, at some point in the future, after so many Bitcoins have been created in the world, then there's going to stop creating new ones. I don't know if that's going to work. That's weird. But I don't care because I don't own any Bitcoins. I'm the other half of the people who don't own Bitcoin. But no, definitely aren't created by banks, because one of the big goals of Bitcoins is to be anonymous. They don't want you to know who's got it. They are given to miners when they successfully find the appropriate hash, but the miners cannot just create Bitcoins as they see fit. So, oh, sorry, I keep forgetting to press the right. Okay, moving on. Okay, now Bitcoins have a bunch of issues. The government has some concerns about them. They are, I'll go over each of these. Illegal tax, how do they tax them? The United States considers Bitcoin to be property, so it's taxed as property. Other countries aren't real sure what they are, whether they are currency, whether it's property. How do you tax it? Of course, since they're anonymous, they're hard to tax. That's an issue for countries. Other things, well, let's go over some of it. Okay. In a sense, Bitcoins are anonymous. So they are the currency of choice. If you're a gun runner, if you want to sell weapons to the rebels, you're going to want them to pay you in Bitcoins. If you're going to do a ransomware, such as the Colonial Pipeline, the ransomware, they paid off in Bitcoins. But remember that all Bitcoin transactions are on this big public ledger. And it turns out that folks at the Department of Justice and the FBI are pretty smart, and they have been able to figure out who that was and then trace them back down and recover some of them. So with the Colonial Pipeline issue, which I followed because Colonial Pipeline is here in Greensboro, that they recovered 63.7 Bitcoins. I don't know what the price, but the price changed. It turned out that they only got $2.3 million back, even though they paid more, because the Bitcoins are worth more when they paid. It took a couple weeks before the FBI could get the money back, but they did recover the money, well, $2.3 million back from the criminals. So it's not as secret as you might think. This bothers a lot of countries, that people are, using Bitcoins for illicit activities. It's interesting to know how Bitcoins are accepted by different countries. In this chart, it may be hard for you to see the legend out at the bottom. The red means they do not allow Bitcoin use. You can't use Bitcoins in that country. And you notice that China is part of Afghanistan. Interesting, Kazakhstan, which is this country right here, is one of the leading Bitcoin miners, and they have some legal restrictions on Bitcoins there. The United States allows Bitcoins, so does most of Europe, Brazil, South America, Australia. A lot of these people allow the use of Bitcoins. Two countries make it the legal tender. El Salvador, a little country here in Central America, and the Central African Republic here, both of them have made Bitcoins the national currency. In other words, they gave up on using whatever it was. I can't remember what, well, actually, just before they went to Bitcoin, El Salvador used the United States dollar. Before that, they had their own currency. Then they switched to the United States dollar, and they found that was a problem because they had very little control over it. If the value of the dollar goes up, then that was good, but it impacted their ability to trade with other countries. So they decided, forget that, stop being tied to those Yankees, and went with Bitcoin. So I suspect that somebody made some money out of that, but so yes, so it's varies all over the world who's going to allow what. I mentioned one of the downsides was electrical use. It takes a tremendous amount of computing to calculate the proper inverse hash. And so Bitcoin mining, which could be done with your laptop if you want to try, and who knows, you might be lucky and get it early before anybody else. But typically we have huge server farms with lots and lots of machinery. The one I saw that was in the IEEE Spectrum was located right next to a power plant with a big dam and hydroelectric plant, so they had a lot of extra electricity. Here's an estimate, now they estimate there's a minimum and maximum. It's kind of hard to guess because nobody really knows what's going on out there. That's one of the reasons the governments are kind of wary of it. But here's an estimate of how much current, how much power. This is in terawatt hours. So they talk about your home uses maybe 100 watt hours of time, and then cities use megawatts. You have megawatt, but this is in terawatts, and you can see different countries right now. The annual power consumption for Bitcoin mining equals the amount of power that Sweden uses. Every citizen company in Sweden uses in a year, which is bigger than all Argentina uses or Israel. Doesn't quite come up to say the UK, but on a maximum peak, it might get that high. So they're using a tremendous amount of power, more than everybody, some of these countries use. There's a lot of digital currency out there. It is washing all around. Bitcoin is not the only one. Bitcoin, as you can see, accounts for about 40% of all the, but there's 19,000 different cryptocurrencies. Now, some have come and gone. In fact, almost all of them have come and gone. And I hope you didn't own any of them. But yes, but some of them have lasted for some time. Here's a chart that I took from Wikipedia that shows you the number of transactions per day. And I know this is difficult to read, but this is transactions per day over here. This line right here is 1 million. So we're up to about 1.25 million. That's Ethereum. Ethereum is a competitor of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is in the blue here. And down at the bottom is Litecoin. Litecoin, yes. Yeah, you just see Litecoin here, not Litecoin, which is going, but God, it's not trivial. You have to realize that peaked at a couple 100,000 transactions a day, which is quite a bit. So that's a lot of transaction. Now, remember, every transaction creates a new block on the blockchain. The blockchain is getting big. This on the side is measured in gigabytes. So it's peaked over 400 gigabytes now and going up at a pretty steady pace. So it's getting bigger and bigger. Is that a question? Okay, yeah. All right. Now, you can buy things with Bitcoin. Some places will accept Bitcoins as currency. Some places don't, but a lot of places do. A lot. That would imply more than half a no. It's actually a small number, but places do accept Bitcoins as currency. And it's been in the news that certain sports stars or celebrities want their money in Bitcoins. It's interesting. I went out and looked at a couple of different places. And if you look here and you look there, Forbes named Bitcoin the best investment of 2013. And the next year, Bloomberg named it the worst investment of the year. So it all depends. It's to note that Bitcoins are volatile. The price varies. 7 times more than gold, 8 times more than the Standard & Poor's, 18 times more than the US dollar. Here's some charts I have. And I kind of stretch the chart. Now, this chart only goes out to about 2016, even though Bitcoin's been around since about 2009. But if you look at the chart, all that it's flat. It's pretty flat. Nothing much happened. And then it started to take off in 2018. Yes, I remember I was someplace 2018 and looked at a TV screen in a hotel or wherever we were walking past, but Bitcoins have hit this big money. And wow, they were next to nothing just years ago. Now look at the price. The price goes up and down. This is 2020 up to 2022. You can see that the price is going, this is, over $60,000 down to $4. That's a $20,000 drop. That's a third of the value. So if you own Bitcoins in a very short period of time, they dropped a third of their value. Ethereum is not much different. Ethereum kind of looks, the peaks and valleys are very similar. Ethereum and Bitcoin jumped, and you can see again, huge drop, huge jumps, huge drop. I mean, it's really nice to buy a bunch of Ethereum here and sell them up here. It's not at all fun to buy some of these Ethereum and then be holding them right here. Yes, statement, question?
Right. February, March of 2000, I mean, can you go back to Bitcoin?
Oh, Bitcoin.
I don't know where it should be at, but there's supposed to be like a huge deal, around March.
Yeah, that was probably around here.
Because
That's that dip. Now, it doesn't look like a big dip because there have been so much huger, but if you expanded that up, percentage wise, it's like a 50% drop in value. Yeah, so if you're holding Bitcoins at the time, oh yeah, it was a big drop. Things just got weirder as time went on. Yes, it's quite volatile. As you can see, the price of these things are dropping, or rising and falling. Now, other investments rise and fall. Here's the Standard & Poor's stock market index over about, I tried to stretch this so it's about the same time scale as the other two charts. And you can see that the Standard & Poor's has gone up. Now, it's gone down lately. Those of you who are old and are relying on the money you saved and invested over years and years to live now, your money is becoming less because valuable. So it's been down. Whereas you can see, but you're not going to be saving a lot by investing in Bitcoins because even though, yes,
Oh, my bad.
there, that was big crash there. Yes, but we're back. All right, good with, so the stock, one of the things I want you to see from these charts is that Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the other digital currencies are quite volatile. You'll note that their value is based on whatever people are buying them for, that people are investing in them now. Most people are purchasing Bitcoins as an investment instead of just, I'm going to go down to Starbucks and buy a cup of coffee with a Bitcoin or a small fraction of a Bitcoin now. People are buying them as investment. They are, of course, inherently worthless. There is nothing to back it. If you go to Standard & Poor's and buy yourself stock market, buy yourself some stock, it is backed by the company. You, in theory, own a small piece of that company. The company might pay dividends. They might give you some money every year for the privilege of having your money. And assuming the company does not go belly up, go bankrupt, you have that stock and then you can sell it later. It's less volatile, less risky. Whereas Bitcoin and other cyber currencies are much more volatile, much more risky. They're based on nothing. Does that answer your question about what do I think about Bitcoins? You probably should have been able to figure it out by that. Do you want to make a statement about that, or?
No, it wasn't necessarily about Bitcoin. It was just like, what was your opinion on like the government sanctioning?
Oh, okay. Funny you should ask that very question. Okay, the United States is considering, they are doing a study, actually have done a study on digital currency. You know, this is just 10 days ago or something, 2 weeks ago. Hey, so I don't just copy these slides from last year, or these are not from the textbook. I make these suckers. Yes, so United States produced a report on the technical evaluation for the U.S. central bank digital currency. United States is not the only way. Central bank digital currency, CBDC, is when a country decides to create digital currency. Now, if the United States was to do this, it would be a digital dollar. The word dollar just disappeared from that. That may be an omen. But yes, it was to be a digital dollar. In other words, it's not floating like Bitcoin. It would be a digital way to spend a US dollar. Might be noted that the US dollar is the leading world's currency, that people deal in dollars all over the place, which has economic impact on the world because the dollar, right now, the dollar is very expensive. If you are buying something in dollars, you have to pay a lot of money. If you are selling something in dollars, it's not as much money. So as the dollar varies towards your local currency, that impacts your ability to buy and sell things overseas. So the United States is, well, it's not, the report was very clear. They do not make any recommendation whether they should or should not go for digital currency. They did instead go and look at all the issues. It's kind of like an academic study where they looked at all the issues of a central bank digital currency. Should they do it this way? Should they do it that way to make a digital dollar? So if the United States decides to do this in the future, somebody has thought about how to do it. They haven't decided how to do it. They haven't made any decisions on how to do it, but they have looked at all the options. So it's a rather, well, it's a 68-page report, and you can get it. Doesn't take a lot of Googling. Technical evaluation for U.S. central bank digital currency, and Google will find it for you. Okay, now, what are the advantages of the United States making one? Well, we want to be able to facilitate transactions, be able to do this kind of like Bitcoin. They might want to make it, you may want to make it more private, make it greater. One of the reasons that El Salvador says it went to Bitcoin for its own currency is that very few people in El Salvador have a bank that they use. They are unbanked. But the new world has cell phones in everybody's hand. Everybody has a cell phone. By the way, cell phones in other countries are different than the cell phones we have here. You don't have an Apple cell phone if you're in El Salvador because they're too expensive. That takes like a couple of years paid by an Apple cell phone, but they have cheaper cell phones. But they work, they do cell phone things. So people have cell phones and you can do Bitcoins on your cell phone. You can get a Bitcoin wallet app that goes on your cell phone and do Bitcoin transactions on your cell phone. So that's a big advantage for people who don't have banks. Now they can do these monetary transactions. You go up your cell phone and my cell phone, and we can pass whatever, $1.95 from one person to the other. Okay. So they feel they might boost economic, make it easier for people to do this, particularly in low-cost transactions. Credit cards cost money. The banks charge companies about 2%, I don't know what it is, about 2% something for every credit card transaction. It turns out for small businesses that the cost of credit card use for that business represents one of their largest expenses. Usually it's the second largest expense behind rent. And maybe third behind rent and employees. So you pay your employees, you pay your rent, and the next expense you have is credit cards. It's a major expense for these. So if the United States went into the business, well, I don't think the credit card companies will like it because we're trying to do it to take out the credit card companies, allow people to make these transactions, allow merchants to accept the money without having to pay exorbitant fees. That doesn't mean there won't be fees. That's yet to be decided. Of course, you have to do this carefully. The US dollar is, as I mentioned, the core of the worldwide financial system. And if you screw it up, the whole place is going to have difficulties, which we don't want to have. And of course, we're concerned about sensitive data. So when they build these things, look at all the goals they had. They don't want to cause great environmental problems. The large use of electricity is an environmental problem. They're not always creating this electricity in the most ecological way. I'm not saying everybody has a hydro dam just for their digital mining, but they may use solar power or something like that. Okay. Of course, we want it to work well. A digital currency that isn't easy to use, that's expensive, difficult, nobody's going to use it. If you're going to make it, you better make something that people are going to use. And one of the nice things is you might be able to interact with other systems. Of course, you want your digital dollar to be the same value as a paper dollar so that you can go back and forth. I can pay somebody in Bitcoins or I can pay them in dollars. It's the same thing. It would be really nice if it interacted with other currencies. In other words, if I want to buy something from an online merchant in Europe and they want euros and I have dollars in my banking account, I can just pay for it. And somewhere along the way, they'll do a conversion between dollars to euros using the current exchange rate. It won't charge me an arm and a leg for that. Okay, all right. So I'm going to go over a lot of the choices that they had doing this, because it's interesting to look at what choices are there in creating a digital. Remember, we're starting from scratch. We're not just going to build Bitcoin and call it the US Bitcoin. They're going to create a digital currency using whatever idea. There are many out there. And so a lot of choices, and frequently they're not binary choices. It's not like, we'll do this or we'll do that. Sometimes it is, but sometimes we'll do something in between, a little of this and a little of that. So just make sure you're awake. I have yet another question. Okay, there we go. Okay, get your cards up there. Okay. Folks online, I can't tell if they're awake, but I can see you don't have your card up. Come on. Yeah, maybe half hearted. All right, we have almost a tie there here. Online folks are paying more attention. Yes, the United States has not decided to create a digital currency yet. Nobody thought they were going to name it the Obama. God, what are you going to name this thing? Oh, yes, you can see the online people. Yes, most of you got that. It's not decided. Yes, they are thinking, they are studying the possibility of doing it. They have not decided to do it. So here are some of we'll go over real quickly some of the design choices. Should there be an intermediate? Should you just do this for you and the other person and get it done? Or should you involve basically a bank and there's an intermediate? Is there somebody else involved? If you do it yourself, there's probably a lot more privacy if there's no intermediate. And it might reduce cost because if you involve a bank, they're probably going to want something for it. Banks are like that. But the bank may provide some digital and financial protections. Permissioned. That is, is there going to be some system that says, yes, this works or not? Is the Federal Reserve going to be involved? It's permissioned. If it's permissioned, there may be, it may keep it, the Federal Reserve may keep the information. It may be more private, and it may reduce the fraud and misconduct. Permissionless might not be sustainable, might not be, and may be vulnerable to attacks. Identity, privacy. We want privacy. That's that's one of the goals of Bitcoin, to provide privacy. If you have a central bank watching everything, you lose a bunch of your privacy. And of course, we're concerned with human rights and democratic values and that sort of stuff. And you may not be able to equitably, we still want people to be able to spend the digital dollars easily without having to rely on a bank. But if we don't have a bank, it may be harder to trace things. And again, the drug runners are going to be spending digital dollars if it's not traceable.
That's why I feel like I think this is a way to centralize.
Well, yeah, and of course, remember, they want to tax your money too. Okay, cryptography. There's multiple ways to do this. One is public key cryptography, which you all should know. PKC is public key cryptography. And then there's zero knowledge proofs, which we've not talked about. Zero knowledge proofs is proving that you know something without telling anybody what it is. Let me give you an example of a zero knowledge proof. Imagine you are colorblind. You cannot tell the difference between a red ball and a green ball. You're fully colorblind. Both balls look identical to you. And I'm telling you, because I can see colors, that they're different. And you want me to prove that they're different without telling you which one is green and which one is red. So you take the balls, you put them behind your back, and you bring out one, and you say, is this red or green? And I tell you whether it's red or green, depending on how it looks, put it behind my hat, and then the person can switch balls or not, and brings it out again and says, is this ball red or green? Now, you can look at the ball because you can see colors and say, ah, yes, it's a red ball. But the person who did it knows whether is it the same ball they showed you before or not. So you have a 50-50 chance that you got it right. So maybe you were just lucky or not. That's a 50% chance of getting it right. So maybe you should do it again and again. If you do it 20 times, then there's only a 1 in a million chance that you were lucky. So after a while, if that's not good enough, you can do it 30 times, it's 1 in a billion chance. So after a while, you're pretty darn sure that yes, he knows there's a difference, but you don't know which one is red and which one is green. So that's a zero knowledge proof. The whole idea is you can prove that you know something without revealing what it is. Okay, I'm not going to tell you how you use that, but it shows in the slide, so I thought I'd explain it. So we can do it with just public key crypto. We can do it fancier. It may be less sustainable. It's probably more secure because these are really tricky things. It may provide more privacy. Okay, do you want hardware systems? There has been a suggestion that we have these little devices, not just your phone, but a US digital money widget you have, and all it does is do your digital money transactions. Now, it could probably be more secure because these little things would be made so they run the program inside, and that program inside does not have to worry about anything else running in as well. If you put it on your phone, which is the other software-based thing, runs on your phone, then you have to worry about software been hacked, what else is going on. There's other issues about all those security things that we're going to spend all semester talking about. But if you're running a hardware device that only does that, of course, that may make it more difficult to everybody to have. Now you have to buy one of these things. That makes it less available to everyone, and also could be risks. Digital signatures. How many people sign these things? Do you sign them? Do multiple organizations have to sign? Do you sign it? The bank signs it, or nobody signs it? Well, if nobody signs it, there are some security problems. If you just sign it, it's probably more private. It's probably faster. If you have your bank, and the vendors sign it, and all these people signing it, then it's probably more secure. We know that everybody's been involved in your group and has better interoperability. Transactions, do we put this on a public blockchain like you see with Bitcoin, or does the Federal Reserve or somebody keep this information private? If it's private, it protects the information more, but it's more observable. Nothing sneaky is going on. And then ledger history. Do we keep the ledgers out there like Bitcoin or the long blockchain? If we make it completely visible, then distribute may be less functional efficient, and it may harm, now everybody sees what's going on. If we keep it secret, it makes it more private, but we have issues about privacy. And there can be no ledger at all, and then you have lots of questions about security and privacy. That's it. So that, again, was what the government is thinking about it. They are not deciding to do anything, but wisely, it's a big topic, and they've had a study group go out there and study the many different aspects of digital currency. On Monday, we're going to talk about buffer overflow. You can find out what we're going to talk about on Monday, on Wednesday, the next Monday to that. If you look at the syllabus online, the syllabus has the calendar in the back. We're back following that calendar. It will tell you what chapters of the textbook to take a look at. So please read ahead. Remember that you should be writing your paper if you're in Comp 620 and 422 does not, but beware. There will be another assignment coming out probably by Monday. So possibly for both, at least, and I'm going to find something for the undergraduates to do for sure. Maybe both. Or, I know you're writing the paper, so I might come up with different versions, maybe the evil and cruel version for the undergrads and the easy light version for the grad students. Okay. So unless there's any questions, that's it for today.
Dr. Williams, I had a question.
Yes, sir.
So I sent you an email about two of the test questions that had got wrong. I don't know if you had seen it
Yes,
yet.
didn't I respond? I thought I responded to you. You didn't get that? Would you, okay, I hate to say this, but send me another email. Remind, if you can just forward the old email, so I remember to look, Michael Armstrong, and then I can look and see, I thought I responded to you, but I could have not. I responded to many people about this, but I will respond again. If you send me an email. I apologize if I did not respond earlier. Thought I had. Okay.
You did. I'm sorry. I just happened to miss it.
Oh, okay, so it's there. Good deal. Yes, I'm not losing my mind completely, just partially. Okay. See you guys later. Anybody else have questions? Okay. That's it for tonight.